the hurricane of 1985. Her name is Gloria. She has arrived on shore in southern New England. Wind gusts now, as Hilton Kaderli told us just a few minutes ago, of better than 100 miles an hour on Long Island. And we have had gusts here in Hartford of 69 miles an hour within the last few minutes.
Charlie Bagley has been tracking this storm all evening and all through the morning. He's standing by now over at Weather Watch 3 to bring us the very latest. Charlie?
Okay, Gayle, during the morning hours, the forward speed did accelerate, going to about 35 miles an hour. Here's the track from 6 o'clock this morning, how it's been coming up. I'm projecting it's going to be the eye of the storm will be moving to Connecticut before 2 o'clock this afternoon, and between now and then the conditions are going to deteriorate rapidly. We can expect that we're going to be getting some strong gusty winds, hurricane force winds along the shoreline, particularly east of the river. I anticipate that there'll be extensive corrosion of the sand there. The high waves coming in, the waves are running about 10 feet high right now. The high tides are going to be 8 to 10 feet, possibly even higher, on the eastern part of Connecticut and Rhode Island. So hurricane winds, torrential rain, and flooding, and there'll be inland flooding in all of the local, the low-lying areas. I'll be back with a complete forecast later in the program. Yes, Hilton?
Charlie, hang on just a second.
Yep.
There's the noon report from Bridgeport.
Okay. I don't have my glasses on.
They've got 81-mile-an-hour wind gusts.
Okay, great.
They're in Bridgeport. Sustained wind of 63.
Okay, as Pat had mentioned, thank you, Hilton, there have been gusts out in Long Island over 100 miles an hour, and that's what's heading our way. The eye of the storm itself is just about islip Long Island right now. And again, I'll be back later with the complete forecast.
Okay, Charlie, I have a feeling we will be seeing you an awful lot during the coming half hour, because all of our news today involves the weather, and indeed that is the #1 topic on everybody's mind. We have been bracing for this storm. We've had the scientific miracles, if you will, of the last 20 or 30 years that have enabled us now to be able to see these storms coming at us, and indeed it has been a frightening thing to watch on a storm track. We kept hoping that we were, in fact, perhaps over-cautioning people, but now we know that the thrust of the storm, the brunt of the storm itself, is coming directly at us and, in fact, is arriving on the southern Connecticut shoreline now.
And as you might expect, we are expecting a whole lot of rain. We have heard reports of up to 5 to 7 inches. Jeff Cole has spent his morning at the River Forecast Center. He can bring us more on that end of the story. Jeffrey, what can you tell us?
Pat and Gayle, I am learning about hurricanes every minute that I stand up here. The wind is sporadic, and it blows you hard, and then it'll stop. The rain is pelting, though. It almost hurts when you hit your skin. Now, earlier this morning, we went over to the River Forecast Center. They're the people who decide, who judge whether or not this rain that we're going to get is going to bother the rivers in the area and cause some flooding. Let's take a look at that videotape as we do that now. Now, they say that the Connecticut River and the major rivers in the area will not flood. They believe it'll be the streams and the smaller bodies of water that will indeed go over their banks and cause some problems for people living along those banks. Their advice is to watch that water. If you see it coming up, go right ahead and get out of the way as soon as you can.
Of precipitation with rainfall higher in local areas, maybe even up to 10 inches. With the 4 to 6 inches of precipitation, we will expect flash flooding.
This is what it looks like this morning. People, before the rain came, in fact, people lining up at gas stations, taping windows, making those last-minute preparations for the advance of Gloria. And once again, Gloria is upon us with heavy winds, winds that we can certainly feel here, and it's almost unbelievable to think that the winds could even become stronger than what they are now. And as I told you before, the wind seems to stop. Right now it's almost clear without any rain, and then it'll come back hard, and the winds will come back hard. So it's quite an experience and quite a thing to watch out here. Pat and Gayle, back to you.
Okay, let's point out, thank you, Jeffrey, let's point out to folks, too, that a state of emergency is in effect. I mean, it seems almost as if it's superfluous to mention, but a state of emergency is in effect. The roads have not been shut down in the state of Connecticut. They have not been shut down in the state of Massachusetts. But the governors in both states have taken on their civil defense emergency powers right now in order to make those kinds of declarations and make the declarations that are necessary for the evacuations. And there are some forced evacuations taking place as well as the voluntary ones. But those evacuations, of course, need to be administered by the local civil defense personnel, emergency personnel, and they are coordinating that. We've had evacuations all along the Connecticut shoreline. We are anticipating within the next several minutes Governor O'Neill to arrive at the emergency storm center at the State Armory, and Marla Romash is standing by there live eye coverage of that when the governor does come in. So we'll be going to that in just a couple of moments when the governor issues his 12 o'clock update, which we have been anticipating.
The governor, Pat, saying he did not want to close down the roads because he wanted to give people a chance to get home if they wanted to go home. Once you got to work, many people found that they were given the day off anyway, so the governor decided he did not want to close down the roads because he wanted to give you a chance to get back home.
That's where you belong right now.
That's right. We're receiving word that the governor is about to walk in the room to make an announcement.
There he is, and he's making his statement. Let's go live.
Our coastline now is being battered pretty heavily with some advanced rains, winds, and tides.
Okay, Al.
Even though the tide is on its way out, there's still heavy flooding along the shoreline. State police departments been checking in with all their barracks, and there's our trees and wires down across the state. Some roads are closed. Department of Transportation, they've got still running trains out of New York, and commuter bus services will stop at 12:30 today, another half an hour. Bradley is open, but many flights have been canceled. DEP, is keeping its eye on a number of dams across the state, which will be available for those that need them. The military department, there are 650 men on duty at this time, men and women, 900 on standby, as all their equipment is ready to roll as soon as necessary. The health department, 3 nursing homes and 1 detox center have been evacuated, and one other one is being evacuated now in Guilford. The Red Cross has 46 shelters across the state in operation at 36 various communities. The electrical customers across the state, there's now an outage of 132,190, approximately 116,000 in Northeast Utilities and 15,000 with UI. SNETCO is asking people not to use the telephone unless it is an emergency. We now know that almost all the students are home from school. I'm asking them, as the governor of this state, to please stay off those phones unless they're calling in an emergency, and others to do exactly the same. We've also been informed by the state police department to make sure if you're taking anything in your home to keep it, any propane and so forth, do not take that into your home. Tie it down securely on the outside. Do not take a chance of having a fire and explosion in your home. I've talked to the towns of Stamford, Bridgeport, Milford, New Haven, Old Saybrook, New London, and Stonington, and talked either myself personally or some of the staff people with their people in those various locations. I also have Lieutenant Commander O'Neill here with me from the Coast Guard, who had a report earlier, Lieutenant Commander of a boat in Long Island Sound, and we don't know whether that was a hoax or not. But if anybody is out there playing hoaxes, this is no time to do it, whether you're an adult or a juvenile, whatever you are. This is a very, very serious matter. Lieutenant Commander, do you want to make a report on that?
Yes, Governor. The Coast Guard in New Haven earlier this morning picked up a mayday from a vessel which gave its position as approximately 200 yards off of buoy 32 Alpha, which would make that vessel somewhere south of Stamford, a few miles south of Stamford. They indicated that the engines were disabled. Communications were very difficult with the Coast Guard station. However, they indicated that there were 22 POBs, which is 22 people on board. A radio operator in Greenwich listening indicated that he thought he heard teenagers laughing. Governor, as your Coast Guard aide-de-camp, I'm informing you that the Coast Guard is ready, willing, and able to respond to any search and rescue, but we ask all of the citizens of Connecticut, this is not the time for any tomfoolery, because the Coast Guard in New Haven will respond to this emergency. The conditions are so severe that the Coast Guard in New Haven has had to move its boats to shelter, and to think that some of our people would indeed have to go out and try and attempt a rescue, which could be a hoax, then all I can say is it would be very difficult.
Thank you, Lieutenant Commander. Members of the press, if you have any questions specifically, please proceed. We have some staff people here. You might want to direct them directly to them. However, proceed through me, please.
Once again, Governor, have you received aid from anyone around the state or received a request for aid?
I just got a call prior to coming out here that the town of Milford, the mayor of the town of Milford was trying to get through. The lines were blocked at that time, and when I finish with this report to you this update to all the people I'm going to call Bernard Jagos from Milford.
What about the airport, Bradley Airport? What does it look like?
I haven't heard anything from the airport other than it was still open. I would assume that as soon as the winds pick up, it will close. There's very few flights going out of there because most of the airlines have stopped flying.
Governor, are you telling us the distress call that the gentleman from the Coast Guard just described was not answered, or is it being answered? Are you taking it as a hoax?
The question is, from the Coast Guard standpoint, they cannot find any boat out there. They have no boats out there themselves because of the rough weather, and they don't know whether it was a hoax or not.
The storm is hitting very hard. In terms of cleanup costs, do you anticipate having to ask the federal government for any money? Will the state be able to pay for it?
Well, certainly if the FEMA people are here, and that's why they are here, and they'll come in with their assessment team, cleanup assessment team, immediately upon the passage of the storm. We don't know. We don't have the slightest idea at this point what kind of dollars you're talking about.
Governor, the roads are still open at this hour. Any idea if you plan to close any roads throughout the state?
Well, many roads along the shoreline are closed by the local departments of police and fire. There's also been, believe it or not, some people, sightseers, trying to go to the beaches to see how high the waves are and so forth. So these are the kinds of things that are very difficult to control. However, many of the local area towns, police departments and fire departments are definitely closing roads along the shoreline, and those that are underwater, as soon as we know, people...
When you say the main roads on the shoreline, are you talking about the interstates?
Well, because there's an emergency situation here, and we want to make sure that the needed calls go through.
Governor O'Neill briefing the press, and of course Marla Romash, you heard her right there. Marla will be bringing us further details as the hour continues here, as we continue our continuing coverage, team coverage of Eyewitness News of Hurricane Gloria. The governor, of course, has just announced, in addition to the story that was told by the Coast Guard aide-de-camp, who was talking about what perhaps is a phony distress call that they received along the lower Fairfield County shoreline this morning, indicating perhaps a boat with 22 people on board in distress off Stamford. In addition to that story, which at the moment they are treating as if it may be a hoax, the governor has announced that Bradley has canceled most of its flights. Buses will be ceasing operation around the state at 12:30. We, of course, are into the height of the storm right now. The governor also indicating the DEP is on standby, watching for any of the dams that we may have problems with, and also that military personnel are on standby. Of course, we've already reported throughout the morning about the standby crews for Northeast Utilities, United Illuminating, Southern New England Telephone. Already, the governor says, we have 132,000 customers, electric customers, without power. Roughly speaking, that means about 500,000 people out of the 3 million people in the state of Connecticut are without electric service right now.
Northeast Utilities is saying that if you are without service today, they're asking for your patience. They've got all sorts of crews working overtime. They've hired additional contractors. They've even called back what they're calling retired qualified employees to come back and help out. So they're saying they will have things under control, but it may take as long as 3 days. I was speaking with someone on the phone. They are asking for your patience. We're going to take a break right now, but when we come back, Bruce DePrest will be here. He's over at the Weather Watch 3 Center. He's got the latest on Hurricane Gloria. We'll be right back.
Of the state of Connecticut, as we are being battered by one of the worst storms of the century. Hurricane Gloria is upon us right now. We have been telling you throughout the day about the electrical blackouts that are taking place, the power lines that are coming down as tree limbs are pulled down by wind gusts of anywhere from 60 to 70 miles an hour that we're getting in Connecticut right now. Wind gusts of 100 miles an hour already been clocked on Long Island. If you do lose contact, you do lose the electricity in your home, we are now simulcasting all of our information over WDRC radio in Hartford. It is 1360 on your AM dial, and we will continue our broadcasting, of course, throughout the afternoon, and you can get the latest information from Eyewitness News by tuning in WDRC radio all afternoon long. They will be simulcasting our programming, and of course you can get that on your portable battery-operated radios at the time. This has been a devastating storm we've been watching for the past couple of days, and of course as of last night, Gayle, we were thinking that it may in fact turn and go ashore at North Carolina or Virginia.
Well, we were certainly hoping that. While you were down here doing a news break, Pat, we heard from the North Branford Police Department. They're concerned about phone outages. They are making a plea for ham operators. They say if you are a ham operator, they wish you would contact them. They are thinking that they may need your help with communication later on throughout the day. As we mentioned, Hurricane Gloria is hitting us now, but she has already left her mark on the Carolinas and Virginia. We get more on the damage that was caused in Virginia from Tom Walker in Washington via News Satellite 3.
Gloria blew past a largely deserted Virginia beach just before daybreak. hurling gale-force winds and torrents of rain at the coastline from 60 miles offshore. Along the Atlantic Avenue Strip, 6 inches of rain left ankle-deep water in some oceanfront hotels. Wind gusts up to 70 miles per hour left an estimated 65,000 people without electricity and left others in need of immediate repair.
I didn't expect it to blow all these windows out. I got a couple of my side windows blown out, too.
One high and dry hotel allowed guests to stay during the storm.
We had guests that didn't have any place to go. That was the main reason.
Others less high found their basements less dry. The thousands who had evacuated found shelter overnight in numerous area schools, even though they didn't find much sleep.
The kids played all night long, and people talked all night because they said, well, we may not be able to talk tomorrow, so we'll talk tonight.
But reports of serious damage were few, and it didn't take long for the cleanup to begin. All in all, people at this resort city are counting themselves fortunate that after planning for Gloria's worst, her worst remained at sea. Tom Walker, Channel 3 Eyewitness News, Virginia Beach, Virginia.
Yes, Tom remained at sea down there, but indeed the storm is coming ashore here in New England right now, and in just a moment we'll be switching live down along the shoreline. We have several reports coming up. We do want to tell you right now to pass along the information that because of the high winds that are now battering especially the eastern third of the Connecticut coastline right now, the state has in fact, although they haven't shut down all of the highways, they have shut down access to the Gold Star Bridge between Groton and New London. And of course, that's because of the wind that is battering that bridge back and forth. As you may know, they shut down in New York City today the World Trade Towers, the Twin Towers there, because of the high winds and the gusty winds. The winds are battering us right now. A
state of emergency has been declared in New York. In fact, they've even taken the torch off the Statue of Liberty and taken it inside. That's how concerned they are about the winds there. We have also received word about the eye of the hurricane. There is some concern that many people may have think that once the eye passed that things are okay. That is not necessarily the case. That is not the case, in fact. Bruce DePrest is standing by over in the Weather Watch 3 Weather Center to bring us an update on that. Hello, Bruce. What can you tell us?
Well, Gayle and Pat, I do have what I feel is a very important message from Roland Laro at the National Weather Service in Hartford describing what effects the shoreline areas may feel when the eye passes right over, which looks like it will be very shortly within the next half hour or so. If we take a look at the live National Weather Service radar, you can see that we have a lot of rain across southern New England at the present time. But note in Long Island Sound, there appears to be a circular low, which right now appears to be the eye of Hurricane Gloria. It is moving very rapidly toward the north-northeast at 40 miles an hour, so we'll be crossing the shoreline very shortly. And here's the message we have from Roland Laro at the National Weather Service in Hartford. It says, remember, beware of the eye. The winds may stop suddenly and skies may partially clear. Don't think the hurricane is over. Soon the wind will be as violent as before, but in the opposite direction. So these conditions will be occurring along portions of the Connecticut coastline before too long. And we also have a few messages from the Bridgeport National Weather Service office saying that portions of the Lordship area in Stratford have been flooded. Most of the coastal population has been evacuated to safer areas there. And the Weather Service office at Bridgeport at noon reports easterly winds at 55 miles an hour with gusts to 70, which is approaching hurricane force. And here in downtown Hartford, we had a wind gust to 69 miles an hour, which is just under hurricane force as well. Looking outside our window here at the Channel 3 Weather Center, the rain is coming down horizontally. Winds gusting out of the east, driving that rain from east to west across Hartford right now. And if anything, winds will be increasing as time goes on as Hurricane Gloria continues to move northward across Connecticut. Before too long, it will be crossing the shoreline areas. So it looks like conditions will be deteriorating further inland over the next hour or so, but the storm again is moving very rapidly, so conditions should be improving as rapidly by late this afternoon and this evening. We'll continue to have updates as the afternoon goes on. Now back to you in the studio, Pat and Gayle.
Bruce, I wonder, I don't know how strapped in you are at that chair there, but that barometric reading that you were showing me before on the wall, I wonder if you can turn, if we can get the camera over to show us just how dramatically we've had the drop-off in the barometric pressure.
Well, the barometric pressure has been dropping very rapidly, not only here in Hartford, but across all of southern New England. And this is the barograph that records the pressure over a period of time. It shows how the pressure is changing with time. And I don't know if you can make it out, but the pressure is just nosediving downward because the hurricane is moving northward very rapidly, and that's one reason why the pressure is falling so rapidly. That trend will continue for the next hour or so, and then as the eye of Hurricane Gloria moves by to the north of our latitude, that pressure should be rising. But again, conditions are going to be very bad for the next few hours, not improving till later on this afternoon. Pat and Gail?
Bruce, for those of us who don't know, could you explain why a drop is so significant right now, why the drop is a big deal now?
Okay, the drop in pressure means that the storm is moving in our direction. Already the storm is a very deep, intensified storm, and the center of low pressure is moving in our direction, so it's moving from an area of low pressure into an area of high pressure, so the pressure tends to drop as the storm center moves in our direction. Now, the storm doesn't appear to be intensifying at this point. It's just the fact that the center of low pressure is moving closer to us, so that's why the barometric pressure is dropping across most of the area right now.
Bruce, is this storm coming in where you thought it was going to come in during our earlier projections today, and we were talking about it being sort of to the eastern third of the state?
Well, right now, if we look at the radar again, it looks like the eye of the hurricane is trying to move toward the New Haven County area. There were some thoughts that it might be moving toward the New London County shoreline, but right now it appears to be moving toward the central Connecticut coastline, perhaps even a little bit to the west. We can't really say exactly for sure where the eye is, but according to radar, it looks like the eye is approaching New Haven at the present time. It moved past Long Island very quickly. There you can see the radar updating in the several ranges that we get, but it now appears that the eye is approaching the general New Haven area and really moving rapidly northward. Just about an hour ago, it was south of Long Island, and here it is already approaching the Connecticut shoreline. So right now it looks like the central Connecticut coast will be the main landfall for the eye of Hurricane Gloria.
Okay, Bruce, thank you very much. We understand now that Dr. Neil Frank is standing by with us live at the National Hurricane Center down in Coral Gables, Florida. He, of course, has been with us and for the past couple of days has been... Dr. Frank, I don't know how you do it. I don't know how you can juggle all of these interviews all over the United States, but you've been doing a remarkable job, and we're sure that your reassurance has been of great assistance, and your warnings to the people here in southern New England. Anything we can do at this point except just stay inside?
No, as a matter of fact, as you've already heard, I heard Bruce, and he said, hey, the storm is almost here, and that's right. And so the full brunt of the storm will be spreading across the coastline there within the next hour or two. Water levels could be as much as 8 to 12 feet above normal, and maybe even higher than that in the north end of the bays, and that's what really gives us a lot of concern. I would say this, though, that we're pleased that the storm has arrived at low tide as opposed to a few hours later or a few hours earlier when it would have been high tide. The thing that made the 38 hurricane so devastating is it came at exactly high tide, where in this particular case, at least you get a little bit of relief in the low tide.
Dr. Frank, do you have any idea how long we will be in danger or how long we're in for a rough time today? Do you have any idea?
It's going to be over very fast because this storm is moving 40 miles an hour or so. It's going to accelerate quite rapidly on to the north and the northeast. And by this evening, you should see weather conditions returning back to more normal.
I have to ask you about that. I've mentioned several times on the air today in our continuing coverage about the scientific miracles of the past generation, the past 20 years, past 10 years. Back in the old days, we wouldn't have known this storm was coming like this, would we? We'd have ship captains out there radioing it.
Well, that's true, but I would want you to know that we do a very good job of observing today, and because of the eyes of the weather satellite, you know, NOAA has some airplanes flying, and we've got weather satellites and coastal radars, that there's the appearance that we're doing a great job forecasting. Well, we do a great job of observing. There's no question about that. But the forecasting is still a dilemma, and we still are concerned that someday we may have some kind of a meteorological surprise, and you could have a storm like this move up to your coastline and maybe get very little notice that it was coming.
But as fast as this has been moving, we really, in a sense, have ducked the bullet because it hasn't moved inland yet along any of the heavily populated areas. It's coming right at us now, but it did miss the Jersey Shore and all of that built-up area.
That's right. The eye passed just offshore, and some of the folks over there are saying, well, it wasn't nearly as bad as we thought it was going to be. That's because they went through the weak side, and if you got to go through a hurricane in the New England area or on the Jersey coast, stay on the western quadrant. Don't get over on that east side that is now moving on shore in the eastern part of the southern shore of Long Island.
Dr. Neil Frank, thank you very, very much for joining us again. We'll be back with you a bit later on in the day, I'm sure.
Thank you, sir.
This has been one remarkable gentleman, by the way. I don't know
everywhere.
I don't know how he does it. Just for your information, in fact, and people probably are quite curious, there is what is called a satellite uplink down there at the National Hurricane Center, and in fact, Dr. Frank probably is in the middle of another interview right now. He is made available to us, and we do have the good fortune of having a gentleman like that who knows his business so well and is sitting at the command center for the United States of watching this information and of charting this information, having it available to us. It has truly been a a good sign, a good signal. Every time we've been able to turn to him, he's been able to give us the latest information. And as difficult a time as we are in right now here in southern New England, it is good to have the kind of reassurances and the kind of warnings that we have been able to have.
Have you noticed he's been working, I'd say, 48 hours straight? It seems like, and he never looks tired, that guy.
Nah, I guess
Gotta
not.
hand it to him. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to tell you about some of the evacuations that are going on in the state of Connecticut.
Stay with us.